The room went silent when my sister's voice cut through the family chatter like a knife. "Still using food stamps," she sneered, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. Her smirk was sharp, cruel, and dripping with judgment. My hands froze around the fork I was holding. Heat flushed my face, not from shame, but from the sting of betrayal. She knew how hard things had been, how I'd struggled after leaving the service, how every grocery trip meant carefully counting coins and hoping the card wouldn't be declined. She knew, and yet she mocked. Laughter rippled from a couple of cousins who thought her remark was harmless teasing, but to me it was a punch to the gut. My chest tightened, my pride stung, and for a second I thought about storming out. I had given years of my life to this country, walked through deserts, bled in the dirt, carried brothers on my back under fire. I had seen things that haunted my sleep. And here I was, belittled in my own sister's kitchen, treated like I was nothing more than a burden with a flimsy plastic card. I swallowed hard, forcing down the anger that threatened to break free. No one knew what tomorrow held. Not my sister, not anyone. And tomorrow would prove that my story wasn't about pity or struggle. Tomorrow the Pentagon would announce something that would shatter every insult, every doubt, every smirk my sister ever threw my way. Tomorrow my name would be read aloud to the nation. Tomorrow the world would know that the man mocked for still using food stamps was about to receive the nation's highest honor, the Medal of Honor. When I first came home from the army, I thought the hardest part was over. I had survived deployments, firefights, the endless heat of the desert, and the bone-deep exhaustion of carrying a rifle and gear for miles in enemy territory. I thought stepping off that plane and breathing American air again meant peace. But peace never really came. What arrived instead was silence, the kind of silence that presses against your chest until you can hardly breathe. No orders, no missions, no brothers in arms watching your back. Just a small apartment with peeling paint, a stack of unpaid bills, and the steady hum of loneliness. In those first months, I tried to hold myself together. I told myself I would find work quickly, that my experience would count for something. Employers shook my hand, thanked me for my service, and then turned me away with polite excuses. Not the right fit. We'll keep your resume on file. We'll let you know. Each rejection chipped away at me. It wasn't that I lacked skills. I could lead a squad through a war zone, keep calm under gunfire, think clearly when chaos ruled. But none of that translated into the world of offices, retail, or factories. Here I was just another man in line. Soon money ran tight. My savings from the army dwindled faster than I'd expected. Rent, utilities, food. It all ate away at what little I had. I remember standing in the kitchen one evening, opening the fridge, and staring at shelves that held only a carton of eggs, a nearly empty jar of peanut butter, and a half-gallon of milk that had already gone sour. My stomach ached, but the ache in my pride was worse. I had fought for this country. I had bled for it. And here I was, wondering how I would buy bread. That was when I swallowed the lump in my throat and signed up for food assistance. The day I walked into the office to apply for food stamps, I felt like the walls themselves were watching me. My palms were damp, and my chest burned with shame. Other people in line looked tired, worn, some with children clinging to their sides. I tried to remind myself I wasn't alone, that needing help wasn't weakness. But the soldier in me, the man who had once been strong enough to carry 2 wounded brothers on his back, felt crushed by the weight of that plastic card when they handed it to me. First I told no one. I went to the store during odd hours when it was quiet, sliding the card quickly into the reader, praying the cashier wouldn't say the word EBT aloud. Each beep of the scanner felt like judgment. I imagined whispers behind me, strangers rolling their eyes, assuming I was lazy, useless, unworthy. They didn't know I had scars on my body that still ached when the weather turned cold, or that some nights I woke up drenched in sweat, my hands reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. They didn't know, and I didn't tell them. But families, they always find out. Mine did too. It slipped in a conversation with my mother when she asked if I needed money for groceries. I admitted quietly that I had gotten help. She nodded, eyes full of compassion, telling me she was proud I was surviving. But my sister Clara didn't see it the same way. Clara had always been the one who seemed to live a charmed life. She married a man with a stable job, bought a big house, and hosted family dinners where everything matched. The napkins, the plates, even the candles on the table. Her world sparkled with comfort and control, while mine felt like broken glass scattered underfoot. Clara looked at me differently once she knew. Her words grew sharper, hidden under polite smiles. At first it was little things. "I'll cover the bill, don't worry," with that smirk that suggested she knew I couldn't. Or, "It must be hard not having steady work." I told myself to ignore it, that she didn't understand, that maybe she couldn't. But then came the night that would brand itself into my memory. It was one of her Sunday dinners. The table groaned under roasted chicken, buttered rolls, and bowls of mashed potatoes, the kind of spread I hadn't seen in months. Relatives filled the room, laughter bouncing off the walls, the clink of glasses ringing like music. I sat quietly, grateful to be there, though a knot of discomfort coiled in my stomach. I knew I couldn't host dinners like this. I could barely keep my fridge stocked. Halfway through the meal, Clara leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine. The conversation drifted toward rising grocery prices. Someone mentioned how expensive food had become, and Clara, with a sly glance in my direction, said it. "Well, some people don't have to worry. They've got food stamps to cover them." The room went still. Forks paused midair. Her words hung there, heavy, before laughter trickled from a cousin on the far side of the table. My face burned. My heart thudded so loud I thought it might crack my ribs. I wanted to disappear. My sister's smirk cut deeper than any insult I'd ever faced in the army. It wasn't just the mockery, it was the betrayal, the way she stripped me down in front of everyone, leaving me exposed and small. I gripped my fork so tight the metal bent slightly in my hand. For a moment, I thought about standing up and walking out, letting the door slam behind me. But I stayed. I sat there, chewing food that tasted like ash in my mouth, listening to the conversation move on while the words "food stamps" echoed in my ears. That night when I got home, I sat in the dark of my apartment for hours. I thought about the firefight in Kandahar, the night I had dragged Sergeant Williams and Private Lee out of the line of fire, blood soaking my uniform, bullets tearing through the night sky. I thought about the pain in my shoulders, the heat of the sand, the way my heart refused to stop even when my body screamed it couldn't go on. I had survived that. I had done what few men could. And yet, here I was, broken not by bullets, but by my own sister's careless cruelty. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the window, watching the streetlights glow against the pavement, wondering if I had become invisible to the world I had once sworn to protect. Was this what survival looked like? To be mocked by family, judged by strangers, and defined not by service but by a plastic card that bought bread and milk. What I didn't know then, what Clara didn't know, what no one at that table knew, was that fate was already moving. That the very acts I tried to bury in silence, the nights of terror and bravery I never spoke about, had been remembered by others. The Pentagon was reviewing my file, my actions, my sacrifice. The very next day, my phone would ring with news that would change everything. But in that moment, as chapter 1 of this new life unfolded, I sat alone, staring into the darkness, carrying the weight of both shame and pride. Not yet knowing which would win. The morning after Clara's cruel remark, I woke with eyes that felt heavy and swollen. Sleep had never come. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the worn carpet beneath my feet, the silence pressing on me like a weight. The apartment was cold. I hadn't turned the heat on in weeks because the bill was already past due. I rubbed my hands together, listening to the hollow sound of my stomach growling, and told myself I needed to shake off last night, to forget the look of smug satisfaction on my sister's face when she mocked me in front of everyone. But forgetting isn't easy when shame carves its words deep into your chest. I poured myself a cup of coffee, bitter and stale, from grounds I had reused twice already. It was weak, but it was warm, and warmth was something. As I sipped, my phone buzzed across the counter. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another late payment reminder or some company offering me a job I couldn't qualify for. But something told me to answer. The voice on the other end was calm, formal, almost too steady for the morning. This is Captain Reynolds from the Pentagon. Am I speaking with Staff Sergeant Daniel Carter? My chest tightened. I hadn't heard my rank spoken aloud in months. For a second I thought I was dreaming. I cleared my throat, my voice raspy. Yes, sir. This is Carter. There was a pause, the kind that makes the world slow down, before he continued. I'm calling regarding your actions during the engagement in Kandahar on the night of July 18th. After review, the Department of Defense has approved you to receive the Medal of Honor. The announcement will be made public later today. The words crashed over me like a wave. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. The Medal of Honor. My mind scrambled through fragments of memory. The deafening gunfire, the shouts of my squad, the smell of burning sand, the unbearable weight of 2 wounded men slung across my shoulders. I had buried those memories deep, too painful to replay. And now, the nation wanted to shine a spotlight on them. My voice broke. Are you sure? I am, Captain Reynolds said firmly. You'll be contacted shortly with more details about the ceremony. Congratulations, Staff Sergeant. You've earned this. When the call ended, I stood in my kitchen, staring at the phone in my hand as if it were some strange artifact. The Medal of Honor. The highest recognition a soldier could receive. And me, a man mocked for needing help to buy groceries, was about to be draped in it. I set the phone down slowly, the reality too large to take in all at once. But almost immediately, a storm of emotions rose inside me. Pride, yes, but also fear. Would this change anything? Would the medal pay my rent, erase my debts, or silence the demons that woke me screaming at night? Would it heal the divide between me and Clara, or would it just widen it? Part of me wanted to keep it a secret, to cling to the quiet anonymity of my broken life. But the Pentagon would make it public, and once they did, there was no hiding. By midday the news broke. My name appeared on websites, in headlines scrolling across TV screens. Former Staff Sergeant Daniel Carter to receive Medal of Honor. My phone buzzed non-stop. Calls, texts, emails from numbers I didn't recognize. Old army buddies messaged me, voices thick with pride. Local reporters wanted interviews. Even distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered my number. And then came the call from my mother. Her voice trembled with emotion, equal parts joy and relief. Danny, I knew they couldn't forget what you did. I knew it. I'm so proud of you. I tried to respond, but my throat ached. I wanted to tell her that I wasn't sure if I deserved it, that the night in Kandahar still haunted me, that every life I couldn't save weighed heavier than the ones I had. But I swallowed the words and whispered, "Thanks, Mom. I love you." Later that evening, Clara called. For a moment, I considered ignoring her, letting the phone buzz into silence. But curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. Her voice was careful, almost too careful. "Danny, I just saw the news. I didn't know. Why didn't you tell us?" Clenched my jaw. Images of her smirk from last night burned in my mind. Tell you what? That the country decided to pin a medal on me while I can't even keep my fridge full. Her silence stretched across the line. "I'm sorry about what I said yesterday," she finally whispered. "I didn't mean." "Yes, you did." I cut in, my voice sharper than I intended. "You meant every word." Another silence. Then softly she said, "Maybe I did. But I was wrong." I didn't know how to respond. Anger and hurt warred inside me, tangled with the faintest thread of longing, for her to truly see me, to respect me not because of a medal, but because I was her brother. But forgiveness doesn't come in an instant. "I need time," I said finally, and hung up. That night, as I lay in bed, the memories of Kandahar returned with brutal clarity. The firefight had erupted out of nowhere, bullets shredding the air, the ground exploding beneath our boots. Sergeant Williams had been hit first, a spray of gunfire tearing into his leg. Then Private Lee went down, bleeding badly from his side. The world narrowed to chaos and instinct. I remembered slinging Williams over one shoulder, dragging Lee with my other arm, my body screaming with pain as I pushed us toward cover. Tracers streaked the night sky. Shouts blurred into static. But I kept moving step after agonizing step, until we tumbled behind a ridge. I don't remember how many times I thought I'd collapse, only that I didn't. Those memories haunted me now, sharper than they had in years. The medal wasn't just an honor. It was a reminder of blood, of screams, of faces I'd never see again. It was heavy before I even touched it. In the days that followed, life shifted quickly. Military officials called to arrange travel for the ceremony in Washington. Journalists showed up outside my apartment, cameras flashing as if I were some celebrity. Neighbors who barely spoke to me before now greeted me with wide smiles and handshakes. At the grocery store, the same cashier who used to glance at my food stamp card with impatience now congratulated me. Her voice syrupy sweet. The hypocrisy stung. Where was this respect when I was scraping together coins to buy bread? One evening, while scrolling through the flood of messages, I paused on a note from an old squadmate, Ramirez. About damn time they honored you, brother. But remember, the medal's not just for you. It's for all of us. His words settled deep in my chest. Maybe he was right. Maybe the medal wasn't just mine to carry. Maybe it belonged to every soldier who had fought beside me, to those who hadn't made it home, to those who struggled in silence just like I did. Still, as the date of the ceremony drew closer, a knot of dread coiled tighter in my stomach. I couldn't shake Clara's voice, the mocking words she had thrown at me. I wondered how it would feel to stand on a stage, the president draping a medal around my neck, while my sister sat in the audience with tears in her eyes. Would the applause erase her cruelty? Would the cameras capture her guilt? Or would the medal simply become another mask I wore, hiding the battles no one wanted to see? As chapter 2 of my story unfolded, I realized something both terrifying and liberating. The Medal of Honor might change how the world saw me, but it wouldn't change who I was. And who I was, scarred, wounded, proud, and still fighting, was far more complicated than any headline could ever capture. The morning of the ceremony arrived colder than I expected. A thin layer of frost clung to the windows of the hotel where the military had placed me, and outside, Washington buzzed with quiet anticipation. I stood in front of the mirror, my dress uniform hanging perfectly pressed on my frame, every ribbon and badge polished until it caught the light. My reflection felt almost foreign to me. For months I had worn the same faded jeans, the same worn-out boots, and carried the invisible weight of debt and hunger. Now, staring back was a soldier again, not the man mocked at a dinner table, not the man swiping a food stamp card. Still, underneath the crisp fabric, I knew the truth. I was both. As I adjusted my collar, my hands shook. I told myself it was just nerves, but deep down I knew it was more than that. The Medal of Honor was more than a piece of ribbon and metal. It was a reminder of Kandahar, of nights where screams tore through the desert, of faces that would never sit around a family table again. Wearing that medal meant carrying their ghosts publicly, a weight I wasn't sure my shoulders were strong enough to bear. There was a knock on the door. A young officer entered, his salute sharp, his voice clipped with respect. "Staff Sergeant Carter, the transport is ready." I nodded, my throat tight. Following him through the hotel hallway, I felt the eyes of other soldiers and staff who stepped aside as I passed. Their expressions carried admiration, reverence even, but I couldn't shake the unease curling inside me. They saw a hero. I felt like a man barely holding himself together. The ride to the White House was surreal. Streets were blocked, police lights flashed, and cameras lined the sidewalks. I watched through the tinted window as reporters shouted into microphones. Their words blurred but their excitement clear. I wanted to shrink into the seat, to vanish into the upholstery, but there was no hiding now. The world knew my name and today it would etch it into history. When we arrived, I was led through security and into the East Room, where rows of chairs gleamed beneath chandeliers. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh flowers. My mother sat near the front, her eyes already glistening. Clara was there too, dressed in a navy blue dress that looked as carefully chosen as the expression on her face. Part pride, part guilt, part something she couldn't quite hide. For a moment our eyes met. She gave me a small, trembling smile. I looked away, my chest tightening. Then came the ceremony. The president himself entered, his presence commanding. His voice steady as he spoke about courage, sacrifice, and the night in Kandahar. He told the story as though he had been there, painting me as larger than life, a man who had carried comrades across fire and chaos with no thought of his own safety. Applause swelled with every word. I stood there stiffly, my palms slick, my mind half here and half back in the desert. I could hear again the crack of rifles, the shouts of my brothers, the sound of Williams gasping for breath as I dragged him through the dust. When the president draped the medal around my neck, the room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, hands clapped, and voices cheered. The medal felt heavier than I imagined, the ribbon tugging against the back of my neck like a reminder that honor was built on blood. I forced a smile for the cameras, but inside my chest ached. Pride and grief battled within me, neither willing to yield. Afterward, as the room shifted into a reception, strangers congratulated me. Generals shook my hand. Reporters asked for statements. Old politicians clapped me on the back as if I were a trophy they could borrow for their own glow. I nodded, I thanked them, but it all felt like noise. My eyes drifted again and again toward my mother and Clara. Finally, Clara approached. She walked slowly, as though afraid I might turn away. Her eyes were wet, her voice soft. "Danny, you were incredible. I don't know how to say this, but I'm sorry. Truly." I studied her face, searching for sincerity. For years, Clara had been the sister who lived in a different world. Polished, comfortable, untouchable. And last week, she had mocked me like I was beneath her. But now, her gaze was different, stripped of pride. She looked not at the Medal of Honor, but at me. "You don't need to say anything," I said quietly. "The medal doesn't change who I am. Or what you said." She flinched, but then she nodded. "I know. But it changes me. Seeing you up there, hearing what you did. It made me realize how blind I've been. I thought struggle meant failure. I didn't understand what survival really looks like. For the first time in years, I saw my sister as human, not as the flawless figure I resented. Still, forgiveness was a long road, and I wasn't ready to walk it all at once. I gave her a small nod, enough to keep the bridge from burning completely. That night, back in the hotel, I placed the Medal of Honor on the desk and stared at it for a long time. Its shine seemed almost cruel compared to the dim lamp that lit the room. People would see it and think of glory. I saw William's pale face, Lee's blood on my hands, the sand soaked dark beneath them. The medal wasn't mine alone. It belonged to them, to Ramirez, to every man who had fought and fallen. I thought again of Clara's apology, of her tearful eyes. Maybe the medal could do more than honor the dead. Maybe it could change the living. But the thought unsettled me. Why did it take a ribbon and a ceremony for people to see worth in me, when I had been right in front of them all along? Over the next few days, interviews piled up. News anchors smiled brightly into cameras, calling me a hero, asking about courage and sacrifice as though those words could capture the truth. I gave careful answers, never letting my voice tremble, never revealing the nights I woke screaming or the mornings I stared at empty cupboards. The nation wanted a hero, not a broken man, and so I gave them what they wanted. But late at night, when the cameras were gone and the lights dimmed, I sat alone with the medal, its weight a reminder that survival came at a price. Chapter 3 of my journey wasn't about the applause or the speeches. It was about learning that honor and struggle could exist in the same body, that shame and pride could sit side by side, and that forgiveness, whether for Clara or for myself, was the hardest battle of all. As I lay down that night, exhaustion pulling at me, I knew this was only the beginning. The medal would follow me forever, as would the eyes of a nation that suddenly cared. But beneath it all, I remained the same man, scarred, imperfect, and still fighting to find peace. In the weeks following the ceremony, life became something unrecognizable. One moment, I had been invisible, slipping quietly through grocery store aisles, praying no one noticed the food stamp card in my hand. The next, I was the man on every screen, every headline, The soldier who had carried 2 wounded men out of a firefight in Kandahar and lived to wear the Medal of Honor. Invitations poured in from schools, veteran organizations, and even corporations who wanted me to speak at events. Strangers stopped me on the street to shake my hand, some with tears in their eyes, some with their children in tow, telling them, "This is what a hero looks like." Every gesture of gratitude felt surreal, as if they were speaking to a version of me I didn't fully recognize. They saw the medal. They didn't see the man who still flinched at loud noises, who woke up drenched in sweat, who stared at overdue bills on the kitchen counter. At first I tried to play the part everyone wanted. I wore the uniform to events, stood tall behind microphones, repeated phrases that sounded polished, words about courage, sacrifice, brotherhood. The crowds clapped, cameras flashed, and people walked away with their version of inspiration. But each time I stepped off the stage, a hollow ache settled deeper in my chest. It was as though I had become an actor in someone else's play, and the role I was trapped in was the unshakable hero. No one wanted to hear about the nights I sat in silence staring at my empty fridge, or the way Clara's words still echoed when I stood in line at the store, afraid of judgment. My relationship with Clara shifted awkwardly. After the ceremony, she tried harder, calling more often, asking how I was doing, offering to bring meals over. Her tone was softer now, her pride tempered with guilt. But I couldn't shake the memory of that night at her dinner table, the mocking question that still made my chest tighten. Still using food stamps. She had said it so easily, not knowing how deeply it cut. And though she had apologized, the wound wasn't healed. Forgiveness wasn't a medal you could pin on and display. It was slow, complicated, messy. Some nights, I wondered if I'd ever be ready to give it fully. One afternoon she invited me over for lunch. Against my better judgment I went. Her house was spotless as always, the table laid out with sandwiches, fruit, and coffee. She smiled nervously as I sat down, her children darting around the living room. "Danny," she said carefully, "I want to understand what it was really like. Not the way they say it on the news. The real way." Her words startled me. For so long, Clara had lived in a world of comfort, untouched by the raw edges of survival. I studied her face, searching for signs of mockery, but all I saw was sincerity. Slowly, haltingly, I began to tell her pieces of Kandahar. How the sand burned your skin even at night, how fear pressed against your chest until breathing felt impossible, how carrying 2 men while bullets rained down wasn't about bravery. It was about instinct, about refusing to let brothers die alone. As I spoke, Clara's eyes filled with tears. She reached across the table, her hand trembling as it touched mine. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't want to know before. But now I do." That moment cracked something inside me. Maybe she would never fully understand, but at least she was trying. For the first time in years, I felt the faint possibility of rebuilding what we had lost. Still, part of me remained guarded. Words of apology were one thing. Showing up when life wasn't shining medals was another. I decided to wait and see. Meanwhile, the public attention intensified. Veterans reached out to me, some with pride, others with bitterness. "Good for you," one man told me at a gathering. His voice tinged with envy. "But don't let them use you. They'll parade you around, then forget you when the cameras stop rolling." His warning echoed in my mind long after, because deep down I feared he was right. The Medal of Honor didn't pay rent. It didn't make nightmares fade. It didn't stop the ache of sitting alone at night in a too-quiet apartment. One evening, I found myself back at the grocery store, standing in line with a basket of bread, milk, and eggs. For the first time in months, I didn't need the food stamp card. The government stipend for Medal of Honor recipients had just arrived. But as I reached for my wallet, I felt the familiar weight of shame rise in my chest, the phantom fear that the cashier would announce it aloud. Old habits die hard. I glanced behind me, half expecting judgmental stares. Instead, the man in line gave me a smile and said, "Thank you for your service." The words were kind, but they carried their own burden. Because what he didn't see, what no one saw, was that even with the medal, I was still surviving day to day, still wrestling demons the nation preferred not to talk about. The media attention also brought unexpected offers. A publishing company contacted me, asking if I'd write a memoir. A television producer wanted me to appear on a morning show. A large corporation offered me a speaking contract with a paycheck bigger than I'd ever seen. For the first time, opportunities lay at my feet. But each one made me uneasy. Were they honoring my service, or cashing in on my story? Would speaking about my scars for money cheapen the truth of them? Or would it finally give me stability after years of scraping by? That night, I sat staring at the medal on the table, its ribbon glowing faintly in the lamplight. I thought about Williams, about Lee, about the faces of men who never came home. Would they want me to take these offers, to use my voice for something bigger? Or would they want me to keep their stories sacred, untainted by cameras and contracts? The questions pressed on me until my chest ached. I didn't know the answer. And still, through it all, Clara called. Each conversation was tentative, like two people learning how to walk on fragile ice. Sometimes we laughed, remembering childhood moments when the world was simpler. Other times, silence stretched between us, heavy with everything left unsaid. One evening she admitted, "I envied you, you know. Not the struggles, but the way you lived with purpose. I stayed here in comfort and you went out there into fire. I mocked what I didn't understand." Her honesty surprised me. It also softened something in me. Maybe forgiveness was closer than I thought. As the weeks turned into months, I began to realize that the Medal of Honor wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of another chapter, one far more complicated than any battlefield. The war inside me, the struggle to find peace, to forgive my sister, to balance honor with reality, was one I would fight every day. But unlike Kandahar, there were no clear enemies, no commands, no victories marked by applause. This battle was quieter, lonelier, but just as demanding. And yet, somewhere beneath the weight of the medal, beneath the shame and pride and sorrow, I felt a small flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Hope that I could rebuild relationships. Hope that survival didn't have to mean isolation. Hope that even scarred men could find a way forward. That night, as I turned off the light and lay in bed, I touched the ribbon at my chest and whispered into the darkness, not to the cameras, not to the crowds, but to myself. "You're still here. That has to mean something." The months that followed became a slow unraveling of everything I thought I understood about myself. At first, I believed the Medal of Honor would fix things. I thought it would silence the whispers in my head, erase the shame of poverty, mend the rift with Clara, and somehow make me whole again. But life didn't work that way. Instead, it revealed a truth I had ignored for too long. Medals don't heal wounds, people do. And people, family, friends, strangers who cared, were what I had been pushing away. The public spotlight began to fade, just as that bitter veteran had warned me it would. The cameras turned to other stories, other crises. Invitations grew fewer. The world was moving on, and in a way I was grateful. I no longer had to wear the mask of the perfect soldier every time I walked outside. Without the noise, I could finally hear the quieter voices around me, the voices I had neglected. Clara's voice, for one. She kept showing up, not with grand gestures but with simple ones. A text checking in, a home-cooked meal she'd drop off without fuss, an invitation to spend Sunday dinner with her family. At first I resisted, but little by little I let her in. One evening I went to her house and sat with her on the porch after the kids had gone to bed. The night was warm, crickets singing in the dark. She held a cup of tea, and I had a beer I hadn't touched. "Danny," she said softly, "I know I hurt you. Can't take that back. But I don't want you to keep carrying it alone. Let me carry some of it too." Her words caught me off guard. I stared at her, remembering the sting of her mocking laughter, the shame that had burned through me. Yet here she was, humbler, changed. I took a long breath. "Clara, when you said that, it cut deep. I already felt like I was nothing. Your words made me believe it was true." She flinched, guilt shadowing her eyes. But then I added, "Still, I know you didn't mean to destroy me. Maybe we were both blind. You to what I was going through, and me to how hard it is for you to understand. She set her cup down, reached over and squeezed my hand. It was the first time in years I didn't pull away. That night, for the first time, I felt the walls between us begin to crumble. Forgiveness didn't come like a flood. It came like drops of rain, slow, steady, wearing down the stone of my bitterness. I realized that holding on to my anger wasn't punishing her. It was punishing me. And I was tired of punishing myself. Around the same time, I began volunteering at a local veterans center. At first, I thought I'd just show up once in a while, shake hands, maybe share a few words. But the more time I spent there, the more I realized how much I needed it. I saw men who looked just like me. Haunted, struggling, forgotten. Some wore no medals at all. Some bore scars deeper than mine. When I told them about my nights of fear, about the shame of food stamps, about the feeling of being left behind, I saw relief in their eyes. They weren't alone. And in that moment, neither was I. One particular vet, a young guy named Miguel, reminded me of myself 10 years ago. He was quiet, restless, carrying a weight he refused to name. I took him under my wing, not as a mentor but as a brother. We'd sit on the steps outside the center, talking about nothing and everything. Baseball, music, nightmares we couldn't shake. One night he said, "Man, I thought you were untouchable, like the metal made you something different. But hearing you talk, it helps. You're just human." His words hit me harder than he knew. Just human. That was all I ever wanted to be. Clara noticed the change in me. She told me once, during another porch talk, "You look lighter these days. Like the metal isn't weighing you down so much." I smiled, realizing she was right. The metal still sat in its case, polished and gleaming, but it no longer felt like an anchor. It was a reminder, not a chain. Months later, the town organized a small parade to honor local veterans. Nothing flashy, just a gathering of neighbors, flags waving, children handing out flowers. They asked me to march at the front, but I declined. Instead, I walked in the middle, surrounded by men and women who had served. Some of them forgotten faces the world rarely noticed. That day, for the first time, I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt like part of something bigger, something unbroken. After the parade, Clara came up to me, her children clutching little flags. She hugged me tightly in front of everyone. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. And for once, I believed it. Not because of the medal, but because of the man I was becoming. That night, alone in my apartment, I sat with the medal in my hands. I thought about Kandahar, about the men who didn't come home, about the laughter of my sister's children, about Miguel's quiet gratitude, about the long road that had led me here. My chest ached with sorrow and hope all tangled together. And then, for the first time, I whispered a prayer, not for strength in battle, but for peace in the life after. As I set the medal back in its case, I realized the journey wasn't about proving Clara wrong, or the world right, or even about survival. It was about finding the courage to forgive, to connect, to keep living when living felt heavier than war. I thought back to the night Clara mocked me, her words like knives. I remembered how small I felt, how worthless. And then I thought of her hand on mine, her voice trembling as she asked me to let her share the weight. We had both been broken in our own ways, but somehow we were learning to piece each other back together. Life wasn't perfect. Bills still came. Nightmares still woke me. Some scars would never fade. But now, when I faced those nights, I wasn't facing them alone. Clara was there. Miguel was there. The veterans at the center were there. And somewhere deep inside me I was there for myself too. The Medal of Honor would always shine in its box, a symbol to the world. But the true honor, I realized, wasn't in the medal or the ribbon. It was in the choice to keep going, to forgive, to rebuild, to live. And as the night settled around me, quiet and steady, I finally understood something I had been too blind to see. The real victory wasn't in the battles I fought overseas. It was here at home, in the choice to rise again each morning, scarred but standing, no longer just surviving, living. Backhand index pointing right. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe to Twisted Fate Chronicle for more powerful and emotional life stories.